In this video, I'm going to show you how I built the concrete stair pad for my deck. And we're going to do it right now. So I'm here editing my footage for the deck. I'm doing a time lapse on it, and I'm hoping it's going to be really great and you guys are going to love it. But as I'm going through this footage, I realize there's certain things that I want to make videos on. So this is a little different for me. I'm going to just go through this footage and kind of explain what I'm doing. And yeah, I hope you enjoy it. So if you've been following my channel at all, you will know that I've been building this deck in front of my house, this 4x8 deck. If you haven't been following, you can definitely check those videos out. And I need a concrete pad for the stairs to sit on. And I am basically doing this video as less of a how-to video and more of a how I poured my concrete pad for these stairs, because I am not an expert. I don't do this every day. I have done about 20, 30, 40, I don't know how many over the years, but this is the first one of this size that I've done by myself. I think it turned out great, and I'm just going to show you how I built it, and you can make your own decisions on how you want to build your own if that is what you're going to do. So the first thing that I wanted to do was cut one stair stringer to be able to use to make sure that I know how far out from the deck I want to be. So I cut one of those. Another thing that I had to figure out is the height of the pad, and I was actually fortunate enough to think ahead of time, and I built the deck in a way where I could put the height where I wanted to have a certain height to the stairs. I wanted 7.5 inches per stair, and I wanted the pad to be even or level with the ground so there was no trip hazard. And I thought it would look better just set down even with everything. The next thing I want to do is build the form. So I'm using 2x6, cut these pieces and nailed them together. I like using nails as opposed to screws, and a little later in the video I will show you why. But I put that form together and I laid it out on the ground. I measured with my stair stringer and made sure that the form is square against the house. It doesn't have to be perfect right now because I have to dig. So I marked around the form where I want to dig, and I'm going to dig that a couple inches bigger. Now I do the hardest part of this entire job, and that is dig. The roots right here are insane. I have two big trees and a bunch of bushes in the front of my house, and I will admit that this was the hardest part. And one thing about this is I had to dig down deeper than I actually needed to for the form. And ideally, you probably shouldn't do that because I'm going to end up filling it back in with some dirt, and you can never compact dirt like it was originally. So there is a chance that the concrete can settle, and you may have some issues with that. But I really didn't have a choice because there were so many roots. So I had to get through them all and dig it out. Once I dug that, I can drop the form in. This is where the measurements become a little more crucial or very crucial. So I measure again with the stair stringer. I want to make sure it's even with each side of the deck. Just make sure it's in the right place, and I want to make sure that the form itself is square. So the way to do that is to measure from one corner of the form to the opposite corner and take that measurement, and then go to the opposite corners, and you want to have the same measurement. So I'm going to use the ground around the form to hold it into place. You can use stakes if your form isn't perfectly level with the ground, and you can use stakes if it is. I just don't need stakes. I'm going to use the ground to hold that form together. So I add dirt in places where I know that the form is good, and then if I need to square it, I can kind of move it around and put some rocks under it, make sure it's level, but I also want to make sure that it's pitched away from the deck just a little bit, so that way water will run off. So once I got the form set, I filled it with some dirt. Again, not the best thing ever. I just try and compact it as much as I can. And then I filled the form with about a 1/2 inch of gravel. Before I mixed the concrete up, I took a metal grid and cut it to the size of the form. I've seen people use chicken wire for this, and this stuff is a little more rigid. It is not as thick as rebar, but it's probably about an 1/8 inch. And I'm going to take this and put it in the middle of this pad just to help strengthen it. Once that's all set, I'm ready to mix up concrete. I am using high strength Quickcrete for this. I use that on pretty much everything. I use that on the sonotubes. It's really great stuff, really easy to work with. One thing I wish I did a little better is to be a little more consistent with the mixes. You'll see that my first couple of bags were really dry. Obviously, when this is mixed up in a truck and they just pour it, it's pretty consistent, but doing it this way with bags is a little more difficult to control. So as I'm pouring these bags in, I'm taking my shovel and my hoe and trying to just feed it into every little crevice, making sure that there's no real voids with the concrete. And about halfway through, I add that wire mesh, and then I just keep mixing bags. And like I said, this is the biggest form I've done by myself. I kind of wish I had somebody to mix while I was pouring it and moving it around, because you really want to work from one area, like one corner of the pad, to the other. So I just keep mixing and filling, and as I go, I'm doing what's known as screeding, and this is where you take a 2x4 or something and move it back and forth on top of the form. And in between that, I'm just taking a trowel just to make sure the concrete is even all around. But the screeding is really what's going to make it nice and flush with the top of that form. And then you can go around with your hammer around the form, and you want to agitate the concrete so that air bubbles come up and it fills in all those voids. Once this is all poured and you do some screeding, you kind of play the waiting game and let this settle a little bit. A lot of the water and everything, I guess paste and whatever the concrete does, it's going to do its thing and let it harden up a little bit, and that's when you can do your finish. I did a broom finish, but I may have done it a little soon. The only thing with that is that you have a really rough surface, and that's actually what I wanted here because of our winters. It can get really icy, and I wanted a nice rough surface. If you want to do a smooth finish, I would recommend a float, not a trowel like I'm using. But if you want a broom finish, it just depends on when you do it. So the longer the concrete cures or dries, the nicer the lines come out, and it's a finer finish. But if you do it like I did it really early, then it's going to be a really rough finish, and you're going to see some of that aggregate even come through the rocks and stuff. But I'm happy with the way it turned out. And once you're happy with your finish, it's a good idea to keep the concrete wet. I have a mister on my hose that I just kept spraying it down every 20 minutes or so for a couple hours. It's not completely necessary. If you're not going to be around, you can spray it down, leave a piece of plastic over it. You just want to keep that concrete wet because that helps it cure. It's less likely to crack, and it just produces a better finished product. Now, once you've waited long enough, 24 hours, you can start to remove your form. So I'm going to start by digging around the form a little bit, digging out any of that loose dirt to try and be able to grab that form. And I'm just going to use a hammer and a pry bar and be very careful here. And this is the reason why I use nails, because it's easier to maneuver that form out of the ground if you're doing it this way. Whereas screws, you would have to basically either dig down and remove the screws or pull the entire form up. But I like to push the form out a little bit before I remove it because I don't want to mess up that edge of the concrete. Which reminds me, you can use a finishing tool to put an edge on this concrete if you wanted to. Since mine was flush with the ground, I thought it would look better without a finished edge, and everything will just be completely level. Eventually, I'd like to just have grass there for now, maybe a walkway in the future, but at least it'll be even with the ground, and like I said, it won't be a trip hazard. So then I clean everything up. I fill it in with some dirt and some topsoil and make it nice and flush to the ground, and that's it. So I hope you enjoyed the video. This style is a little different as far as the concrete pad. If you do this differently, let me know. Definitely. What am I doing wrong? It's totally fine. You can let me have it. I just wanted to show you how I built mine, and I hope you enjoyed the video. If you want to see more like it, you can click hereish and check those videos out, and I'll see you on the next one. Thanks for watching.